Our CEO panel. Joanna, come up, please, of JetBlue, Adrian of Abra Group, LATAM, Pieter of Indigo, and Richard of FedEx. Come and have a seat next to me.
How are you?
Hi.
Actually,
good
somebody
to see you.
got
Thank you
it
for
here.
your warm hospitality.
Richard,
good to see you,
Richard,
sir.
nice
How
to
are
see
you?
you.
You well?
Yeah, doing very well.
Very
Thank
smart, very smart.
you. Yeah.
Good luck.
All right. As I say, it's all rather different this time, isn't it? Not having had a chance to have a chat. Oh, gosh. I could have stayed at home. As I look, I think one of the difficulties with the CEO panel is, first of all, getting the CEOs to agree to come on it. But once they've agreed to come on it, and I'm very grateful that you all have, is then really distilling between you what the difference is from last year and how things have evolved, and what you see as the various challenges that you face. But I think we have one particular thing that's rather interesting, which is in the last 24 hours. We have your announcement, Peter, of
Which one? I have a couple of them.
they did some plane.
We announced to double up our wide-body order from 30 to 60.
Right, hang on, let me make notes on this, because these are good examples of all the problems in the industry. Go ahead.
And opportunities. No, we've signed up we placed an order for the first time in our history to go for wide bodies last year. We've actually yesterday announced an MOU to double that from 30 350-900s up to 60 350-900s. That was the first announcement, and the second was a collaboration in terms of beyond code-share. We start our flights into Europe for the first time, and code-sharing there with the likes of Air France, KLM, Virgin, and Delta.
I want to fix on that bit first, because at the same time, in the last week or two, we've had your announcement of Blue Sky with United, which is, and the issue I'm raising in terms of the industry is one here of consolidation without consolidating. And so, if we just talk about, it's been I don't think I'm being unkind when I say it's been a difficult time for JetBlue. I think you'd agree.
Yes, absolutely.
You all must have been very pissed off. I mean, what's that famous joke about, to lose one is unfortunate, to lose two is careless. I mean, you lost two major agreements.
But 3 times a charm.
Oh, good one. But this one's different, isn't it?
It is.
This one is different. And for those, I think everybody does know, JetBlue and United have announced, I'm not sure what to call it.
Collaboration. But we announced ours on Thursday.
A collaboration. When is a collaboration not a cooperation or a code share?
So I think it's basically a synonym for cooperation. It is not a code share. It's a collaboration with United Airlines that touches on 4 areas: an interline, a frequent flyer partnership. United will receive some slots at JFK. And then we are going to be moving United's ancillary fees onto a platform that JetBlue has. So we'll be running their ancillary platform.
Right. People like me immediately say, is this the first step towards eventual merger? And people like you answer,
no.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. We've spent a lot of time with the Department of Justice over the last 5 years. And we're playing it safe, right up
How
the middle.
pissed off were you at JetBlue, both with Spirit and with American? You thought you got it on each occasion, and at the last minute, politics moved in.
And, it's frustrating as a small airline. So JetBlue represents about 6%, 5% of the domestic seats in the United States. And we operate in a world where there are 4 large carriers. And so as a smaller airline, it's difficult to compete on scale with those big carriers. So a small guy trying to combine with another small guy to be a medium guy or girl was unable to actually accomplish that. So extremely frustrating, because the DOJ allowed all the other transactions to go through and then decides under the Biden administration to block these.
But this cooperation helped. Now, yours is a what's yours? Yours is a code share.
Very simple. I mean, we're a simple airline. It's just simple. We do what we say. It's a code share. We're going to code share to 30 points in Europe, and we're going to code share across the Atlantic. It's a simple code share, but a very...
Oh, come on. There's nothing simple about it.
You know, I think what is very important, and of course I'm jokingly saying it's a simple one, but what we are doing actually is connecting the networks, and we operate in India to 91 cities in the nation itself. There's a lot of opportunities connecting over India, by us now connecting India directly to Europe with our flights, and there connect to these networks. It's just expanding the travel options for our customers.
One more question on this, then I want to move on. I'll use the word interesting. How interesting is it to negotiate with your former airline alliance, your former boss? I mean, it must be a bit weird.
You know, I'm Dutch and not English is not my native language, so I should figure out what interesting means in the way you're asking it. But it has been a wonderful journey of talks and negotiations. But more seriously, you know, it's not rocket science. If you connect two networks and further on you start connecting it, and there's a mutual benefit. And already for the past, 4 years, we have a collaboration with both Virgin Atlantic and Air France-KLM connecting on our domestic network in India. They fly quite a lot into India. We have codeshares with multiple airlines, including them. Now we start our flights into Amsterdam and Manchester. So the opportunity to connect over that network and make use of the networks there, it's a pretty straightforward, well, you call it negotiation, but it's a pretty straightforward negotiation. So, but yeah, being back in the European arena with now Indigo flights, of course, that's a great experience.
Richard, it's a fascinating experience for you to see all of this. When you see the passenger carriers.
Sure. We work with a lot of passenger carriers too. We move volume on their underbellies to augment our all-cargo airline, which is the largest on the planet. And we actually bought some airplanes too recently, 8 777s we announced.
I saw that.
Yeah. We have a fleet of over 700, so it's a large fleet.
So this is fascinating because I don't think, well, many people in my business, I mean, don't realize just how enormous as an airline you are.
We're actually much bigger on the ground. The majority of our traffic actually doesn't touch an airplane. So that's the remarkable thing. And what we've been seeing out in the global trade arena for some time now, really going back to the first Trump administration, when he started the, I guess, trade war that ricocheted around the world with Xi Jinping in China, is a move from globalization to regionalization. So we're seeing goods travel shorter distances between production and consumption. So more and more of the volume can be driven to destinations. So most of our volume actually moves in our vast surface networks, which connect basically every household in the world. We connect 99% of world GDP. We're in 220 countries and territories, and have incredible pallet and parcel handling capabilities in those markets.
I've always said that the carriers, the parcel carriers, the courier carriers, all of you are the best barometers of what's happening in the economy.
Yes, yes and no. Well, it can be misleading because take the United States, for example. We've always been seen as a bellwether of the economy.
Yes.
But the United States, 70% of the GDP is services, not manufacturing. So we're a bellwether for the goods economy.
Right.
Consumer goods economy, which increasingly the United States is less reliant on.
So what are you seeing in the goods economy?
Softness. Obviously, the tariffs have taken a bite, but we have seen a resumption in the trade since the president lowered the reciprocal tariffs into what I would call the zone of reasonableness.
The zone of reasonableness.
I actually used that term with the Secretary of Commerce's office. So, yeah, the zone of reasonableness. That's where we think the tariffs have come back down. We'd like to see them maybe come down a little lower and a little more trade to resume, particularly for low-value goods that are not in the strategic national
the de minimis.
interest to repatriate. Yeah, the de minimis.
Right. So just talk, and then we'll come to, but I am fascinated to see the direct correlation that you see in what happens at, if you will, at the pointed end, the parcels arrive in the things, and the way that the policy changes. Yep. Do you suddenly notice things falling off a cliff and then coming back? And how difficult is it to manage when you've got tariff changes on a daily basis?
It can be incredibly difficult, but as difficult it is for us to flex our network up and down, it's even more difficult for our customers. So what we've really been focusing on is harnessing the power of our data and our expertise. We're also the largest broker in North America in terms of entries filed. So we have a vast amount of data, classification data on all these commodities coming into the country. So we're using the power of our data, of course leaning into AI and better digital tools to help our customers. Because when these tariffs fluctuate like that, particularly the smaller customer, and a lot of your formerly de minimis low-value goods, this is impacting small customers in a very big way. They can't keep up. So we have to help them with better trade classification tools so that we can smooth out the entry filing process.
Adrian, are you noticing any shift in business as a result of what's happening in the United States? Is the US traffic weakening?
It's a great question. The short answer is no, and not that we don't expect it to, right? We look at it every day. We have seen a significant change in consumer behavior, right? And I think this is consistent through, which is tickets are being bought a lot later than they were, but ultimately the passengers are showing up, which given kind of the political dynamic, we think is pretty remarkable.
I guess sort of maybe the journalist in me sort of is still prodding around, because I've asked every airline CEO I can find, are they seeing weakness? And sort of everyone's saying, not yet, but ... Would that be a fair description?
That's right, yeah.
What about yourselves?
We are seeing weakness in domestic markets. And I think most airline CEOs in the US would say domestic is weaker.
What is predicating that domestic, that weakness?
Particularly leisure. So what's predicating, I think, is the volatility with tariffs. Safety is also kind of top of mind in the United States, because on the news, every incident that occurs gets sort of a lot of public display. And so the challenge is, I think the consumer is uncertain, and as you think about the summer, confident to take that one vacation, but perhaps rethinking that second vacation just out of concern that the tariff volatility may drive a need for them to save more, or they may have to spend more on goods.
And this is where the whole thing the knitting starts to get snagged on the nail, doesn't it? And it all unravels, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's very specific to travel, though. So if you look at the consumer health overall, we break it down by category of spend with credit card data that we have. So there's travel, groceries, fuel, other goods. Travel most certainly took a step back in February. Other categories remain quite consistent. And we're also seeing in Democratic states and Republican states that the Democratic states are spending less on travel than the Republican states.
All right, I'm going to go here. I'm going to regret it, but I'm going to go here. Why?
Your guess is as good as mine.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing, but I mean, the whole thing should be hitting everybody sort of roughly the same. I don't know.
I think it's a confidence, maybe a confidence and a agreement with different policies. But if you take a map of the United States, you can very clearly see with travel spend a difference in spending habits in blue states, Democratic states, and red states, Republican states.
That is truly interesting. Were you surprised?
A little bit, although if you dig deep, you see some publications speaking a bit about this. But even if we are largely present in Democratic states, and so when you live there, you hear, I think, more concerns around tariffs and more concerns around the volatility and what's going to happen, and I think there's a different level of confidence in the Republican states around spending.
Let's just take a chance on this, I've no idea. Is there any suggestion of any difference on your side? That one could, between that?
We're not seeing a material difference in red states versus blue states in the United States from consumer spend, at least nothing that's popped out at me. I would say another factor, in addition to maybe the vibes, as you might want to call it, depending on which flavor of news you get when you go down the rabbit hole of social media, whether you take the red pill or the blue pill, you're going to have different vibes in terms of how you feel about the economy. So I do think in the blue states, the vibes are quite bad. You also have higher taxation in a lot of your big blue states, which could be taking a bite as well. I would hazard a guess. We're seeing it pretty even, like the softness in the industrial production, the softness in the consumer economy. pretty even in our business, pretty evenly distributed across the United States, but probably more acute in Joanna's.
I wonder what is it that the industry, this industry, again, has the same issues that come back again and again and again. Admittedly, this year we have some new ones with things like tariffs. But if we take, for example, supply chain, why do you think this can't be solved?
Well, I think it can be solved. I think and I kind of alluded to it in the beginning. I think it can be solved with the power of data, because at FedEx we often say we don't shape policy, we don't write policy. We just have to comply with it, and we have to help our customers comply with it. So I think the power of the digital insights that we provide to customers help them plan their supply chains better. And we did a very smart thing about 5 years ago. We stood up a division we call FedEx DataWorks,
right,
where we took all of our systemic data and we put it in a big data lake we call Atlas. And we have a digital twin of our network. Every system, every piece of data that flows through those clearance systems, our flight planning systems, our route planning systems, our hub sort technology and scanning, all goes into that. So we can use the power of that data in really, really profound ways to help our customers. We're a very data-rich company. We move 17 million shipments every day. We move over 6% of the United States GDP. We move $2 trillion worth of commerce globally every year. So imagine the richness of that data. If data is the new oil, we are Saudi Arabia.
Let me ask you, how many aircraft at the moment do you have on the ground? Or I'm trying to get a feel for, and I'm not be so technically precise that you can sort of wiggle out of it, but you know what I'm asking. How many aircraft are unusable at the moment as a result of either engine difficulties or any form of supply chain problems?
9 out of about 300.
That's only 9?
Correct.
That's very good.
We're seeing, I think, some modest improvements. I think the challenge is being certain that there's a level of predictability around planning. So we'd expected a slightly higher number, but we're around 9 right now.
We have a pretty extraordinary number, but part of it has to do with Gold's previous financial difficulties, and today trying to service engines that for a while had been run out, getting them through. So, there's somewhere between 30 and 40 at Gold, and then at Avianca, there's 7 today.
How many?
7.
7, so that's not bad for Avianca, so
Yeah.
that's not bad, but
Yeah.
7 out of?
7 out of 146.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
I'm afraid our number is going to be a bit higher. Indigo has a total fleet in the range of 430 aircraft, and the number of planes on the ground today is in the range of the 40-ish. So that's the number we're having today, which, and don't fall off your chair, it's significantly better than what it was 6 months ago when we were in the 70s. So I guess we've turned the corner in situation. Still, the number in itself is a horrible number to look at.
So we have probably 30 to 40, but they're not parked because of supply chain issues in the main. It's more about the muted demand environment we're in, and what I alluded to earlier, where so much of the volume moves on the surface. So we've flexed down and we've parked some aircraft in the soft.
Right, so that's not supply chain.
Right.
But I am constantly amazed at this supply chain issue, particularly in delivery of new aircraft. I mean, I can't think of many other industries where you buy something, you spend a great deal of money on it. In previous years, it would have been delivered within a absolute time frame, and now all of a sudden you're being told, well, maybe 18 months late, well, maybe a year. Oh, a major compensation check, but terribly sorry.
It's not a major compensation check.
It's not.
Not to reflect the level of damage. I mean, it's a significant impact when you don't have a brand new aircraft flying that you purchased and you expected to operate. And so it requires a level of agility, flexibility. We're extending aircraft that were set to retire because we need the lift.
Can I have a sort of a human reaction from all of you? Do you get pissed off about it? I mean, it's been going now for 5 years, at least since the pandemic.
Of course we do.
Extremely.
Yeah, of course we do. But it's interesting, right? And this is not, just to be clear, it's not that you're trying to be understanding. This is the OEM's problem, not ours. But you see them trying, right? The level of complexity of these supply chains that were built up sort of organically over time is so huge and so undocumented that you see them and, they fix one bottleneck, you just have the next bottleneck pop up. You just keep going down the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 suppliers, and something always pops up.
Yeah, but I do think they're getting their arms around the issues, and to get angry at them is somewhat futile, because at the end of the day, you want your aircraft back in service, and that is the goal I think we all have. Is we want the planes we paid for to be flying, and so how do we help you get there? And I think it's clearly, I think we have more visibility now into what's happening. But in our case, these are brand new engines, and there's challenges with brand new engines, and it's
Well, they can't stay on the wing.
Okay, they can't stay on the wing.
They can't.
But I think if you look at most programs, if you rewind the clock,
Right.
most new programs, it takes a while to break them in. This has just been going on for so long and exacerbated by COVID and supply chain issues coming out of COVID.
If there were to be EU 261 for delays in deliveries or planes on the ground, we could pretty much stop flying and just collect the EU 261 fees, right?
Good idea.
If you listen to Willie's speech today morning and see how much average airlines are making per passenger, and then see these delays, maybe it's not a bad idea.
I'm not being rude.
6 hours it starts counting. Well, 6 hours is that's the world we live in as airlines, right? So I think that's something to be. So I would have answered a bit more a firm yes to your earlier point. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
You got how many planes on order?
A little short of 900, 885 to be precise.
800.
Yeah, no, it's a good number, and I think with that good number, we're getting a plane in each and every week for the next decade, and that in itself, of course, allows us to deal with all these fluctuations. So despite all these planes on the ground and all the challenges and the supply chain issues, we have been able to live up to our capacity guidance. We have pretty much, we are an airline now which is 50% larger as it was prior to COVID. So we were welcoming 78 million customers a year prior to COVID. Today we're 118 a year. So that's like a 50% jump, and that can only be done by putting all this additional capacity in. So we've been able, thanks to that order book really, to deal with the situation. So I think the order book for us has been a very powerful strength, and if you wish, hedging against some of the challenges the industry is facing.
One of the big problems that has developed over the last year, I mean, it's been around for a while, but it crystallized over the year, is the infrastructure issues. And you're smiling.
I get very angry about that.
You do? Which bit?
Air traffic control.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
Infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I understand. But it's really, the reason I raise it in this way is because the United States, obviously with what it's going with, the infrastructure in India that you are now seeing being put in a way to make sure that it repeated, the infrastructure in your part of the world that still needs to be upgraded quite dramatically in many cases. So let's start with you, sir, because you fly
Everywhere.
everywhere.
650 airports.
Who's got the best infrastructure?
Oh, wow. I would say increasingly it's the Middle East. Their infrastructure is increasingly outpacing, I think, a lot of the rest of the world. Asia probably still has them beat. Sorry, no offense, but the Middle East is making a lot of investment in infrastructure. I was very impressed. We're putting a new gateway facility in Istanbul. The airport there, they got a lot of land. They've invested a lot. I mean, that's an airport that's got a lot of room to grow, and they're investing in infrastructure smartly. It's probably most choked in the markets that are growing the fastest. Vietnam is a market I've spent a lot of time in. They can't get the new Long Tan airport built fast enough for my taste because they're maxed out at the existing airport. So, yeah, there's infrastructure challenges, particularly in your fast-growing markets and some of your more mature Western markets. Europe, the United States, as Joanna alluded to, has issues.
So let's do the fast-growing, and then we'll do the sclerotic old markets. You've had experience, Peter, of both. Obviously, the fast-growing infrastructure here, and the slow, the more difficult in Europe with ATC.
Yeah, well, Europe clearly has different set of problems. The shortage of real progress on the ATC side, still the fact that there's still no single European sky, which I think is an appalling reality in Europe. Contrary to indeed India, where over the past decade, I think the number of airports has pretty much doubled in terms of that. And importantly, not only more airports, but also bigger and better airports. And this year is a very important year for Indian aviation, with a second airport in Mumbai opening and the second airport here close to Delhi in Jewar. So I think in India, contrary to probably some other parts of the world, new airports are being constructed, more airports are being constructed, and airports are being upgraded. Then, of course, we have the usual discussion on tariffs and how expensive it is and stuff like that. But the fact that the infrastructure is being created, and interestingly, the infrastructure is being used, because I think that's one of the challenges in Europe. You build airports and you build infrastructure to use it, right? So that I would say India is making big strides forward in creating the infrastructure and using it to the optimum.
We'll come to you, John, in just 1 second. I want to go to your part of the world.
So we're in an interesting part of the infrastructure cycle in our part of the world, right? Our part of the world, highly dependent on aviation for connectivity. Airports were an easier solution, planes were an easier solution than roads, right? So you have historically built reasonable aviation networks. They're pretty saturated today, right? And so when you start looking at what's happening today, the large airports in the region are starting to collapse, and you don't see kind of the next cycle of investment coming, right? So what you see, we live it, in our biggest hub, which is Bogota. You see a push by the regulator to try to use the airport beyond its capacities, and kind of all that goes with that, whether it's with air traffic issues, with turnaround issues on the ground.
But then it begs the question: haven't they learned? Haven't they learned from seeing? I'll take that as a no. Having seen, if you don't do it, what is going to happen? They sort of continue regardless.
Yes, because ultimately the harsh reality is, even if you see what's going to happen, political issues tend not to get solved until it actually happens. People don't solve issues that are highly political when there's a limited budget, right? People don't say, hey, I'm going to take money that I would otherwise use for something that I need today and invest it in this so I avoid tomorrow's problem. Tomorrow's problem is tomorrow's problem.
So this has been a decades-long problem, picking up on tomorrow's problem for years in the United States. And our airline is the most exposed to air traffic control challenges as a % of our network than any other US carrier, because we're based in New York and in the Northeast. The issues span hiring. During COVID, the FAA, Federal Aviation Authorization, stopped hiring and people retired. You already had a shortage of air traffic controllers, so there's a personnel shortage. There's a technology limitation. There's a funding limitation. And frankly, this administration is the first in a very long time, ever, to actually say we've got to solve this. And the catalyst was the American Airlines plane crash for air traffic control focus. And so it is so desperately needed, obviously very safe, and the delays are there because it's slowed down to become safe. But
so your new partner, Scott Kirby, said to me yesterday in the interview, he said that he was the most optimistic he has been that this is now going to be solved or sorted out, because all three divisions, executive, legislative, the industry, everybody was on the same page. Do you, the two sort of predominant US participants, do you share that optimism?
I absolutely share that optimism, but we have to remember that the focus was driven by an accident, and that is a real problem. Yep. And when you think about, that catalyst, the rest of the world should learn from that.
Was it the accident, or was it the accident that then was followed on by Newark, in a sense?
No, it was the accident, because this energy started surfacing in the January timeframe.
Yeah, and it didn't have to happen. I'm with Joanna. This one really pisses me off, to be quite frank. Particularly the lack of focus on the hiring and everything. But what's inexcusable to me is the technology. The fact that we're lagging behind so badly on the technology sector. When we talk about trade wars and whether we're getting a raw deal or not, we seem to forget that the United States is the largest exporter, unfortunately it doesn't move on my airplanes, of arguably the most precious commodity in the world, software. How, in a country as wealthy as the United States, that leads the world in software as an export, how do we lag behind in technology in our air traffic control system? It's inexcusable. And I will say, I'm optimistic that this administration is putting, at least they're saying the right things and they're putting some focus on it. Unfortunately, the previous DOT head was more concerned with scoring points on Twitter and addressing consumer protection things like SkyMiles programs, which isn't even his remit. So at least Sean Duffy and this crew are saying the right things and they're taking it seriously. I want to see some action on this, though, because it has to happen.
And that does look like that is now happening, at least in the US. You haven't got anywhere near as much hope, have you?
Well, look,
Be honest.
ultimately it's an electoral cycle issue, right? People don't spend money where results are not seen within their electoral cycle, right? And the issue is, until there's a crisis, people don't focus on the issue. So, you know, we have a situation right now in our airport. I think it's similar to, again, Bogota. It's similar to what Joanna's saying. We slow it down. Bogota Airport has more ground delay programs in a year than the entire East Coast. We have at least one every day, it's often 2 or 3, and that has to do with the airport cannot tolerate the amount of traffic that's being put through it. Does it get solved? Yes. In a safe manner? Yes. Does it resolve the issue? No, it doesn't.
I sort of feel obliged to mention the next subject, even though I'll also groan even as I mention it, which is SAF. Are we ever going to get any? And I did an event. Okay, I did an event in Brussels where I was told by everybody on the panel there isn't enough SAF. There won't be enough SAF. The mandates for SAF can't be met. And I walked out afterwards, and people in the room said, "Oh, they got you there. They had you. They fooled you. There's plenty of SAF. There'll be loads of SAF. SAF will be ready in time." And then I said to Willie afterwards, when I was at the dinner with him the other few weeks ago, I said, "No, there's not enough. What is the truth of this?" Start with you.
I think the folks you were talking to had it right. there ain't going to be enough SAF. You know, our approach at FedEx, we put this very audacious goal out there to be carbon neutral by 2040, not by 2050. But the way we've looked at it is you want to decarbonize what's possible based on the technology available.
Right.
Modernize your fleet, lean into SAF. We just announced a big deal at LAX in the US with Neste to buy, you know, a significant amount of SAF there. So absolutely trying to do everything we can on the SAF front. But you have to lean into the second part of that, which is neutralize the rest. And so we spent $100 million with Yale to stand up their Yale Center for Natural Carbon Capture, looking at carbon sequestration, because I think it's not a one size fits all solution. It's a all of the above solution to this problem, and it has to be.
Am I being had?
You know, without jumping into conclusions, what Joanna and Adrian will say, I think you'll get 4 times the same answer. So perhaps rather than confirming what Richard just said.
Your microphone, mine, oh, you're back. We're back. No, I think you're back.
Yeah. No, I said rather than repeating what Richard just said, I'll be very keen to hear to whom have you been speaking in Brussels after that panel, who told you they got you there?
Energy suppliers.
Sorry?
Energy suppliers.
Exactly. And were they really supplying, or were they kind of consultancy firms right in the middle trying to make sure that
The
that's
latter.
happening? Here we are.
The latter.
Here we are.
So I was had by both sides.
So I think that the one who was really put in, is that, You know, look at the reality, what has been developed so far, and some of the challenges which are there, both from a technology perspective as well from a trade-off between what are you going to use for food and food stock, and what land are you going to use for SAFs. I think the reality is going to be really that it's going to be much slower unless huge technological breakthroughs are going to take place. That's the reality which is there.
Go on, pile on.
Well, you've been had, but Peter said it right.
Not the first time, don't worry.
No, but Peter said it right. It's a more complicated question, right? There are trade-offs in everything, right? What surprises me coming into this industry is, look, we are all doing, and you hear it from all of us, we are all trying to be responsible. We are all trying to do our best to minimize the impact of the environment of what we do. But when you look at this on a rational basis, right, this is one of the hardest pieces of industry emissions to decarbonize, right? You need a safe, non-explosive, high energy density solution that allows these planes to fly as far as they fly, as safely as they fly, right? And we as a world seem to be focused on starting with this really difficult issue, which again, we're doing work on. But instead of focusing on things like fixed energy sources, right? Instead of focusing on construction, instead of focusing on mining, instead of focusing on all the other issues that really are much easier to deal with than this one. Now again, SAF is part of the answer. Carbon capture is part of the answer. You know, we think newer technology planes, higher density LOPAs, so we're moving more people on the same. It's part of the answer too. But ultimately, there is a challenge in the absolute focus we have on decarbonization needs to be inside this industry.
Can I just twist it around, because I'm sure you're going to agree with them on the side.
Well, it needs to be affordable too.
Details.
Details.
Do you think the public care? Because I just wonder whether or not there is a level of NIMBYism. I don't want you to fly, and I want you to do all I want you to make the savings. But my holiday to see Grandma, that's because I haven't seen Grandma for 10 years. So I need to go and see Grandma.
So I think the public cares, but I don't think it necessarily translates into whether they're willing to pay for it. Or whether they're willing to dial back that extra trip, at least in the United States. I mean, when you see purchase drivers, SAF and carbon neutral movement, environmental friendliness, that's not part of the decision behind why I purchase a flight or not. And I know a lot of us have put things like carbon offsets in the booking flow. We have a program where corporations can buy SAF certificates, but it fundamentally doesn't translate to the average person who wants a low fare, a great experience to get there on time.
If you put carbon offsets in the booking flow, you get above $5, no one picks it up.
Yeah, I've never paid it.
The one market where we do see it drive consumer behavior a little bit is Europe. I mean, for us in our industry, customers will sometimes default to more expensive options if they're greener and more environmentally friendly. We do see some customers that say, we can't use you if you're picking up and delivering my packages in an ICE vehicle. You need to be in an EV.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we've heard that from customers in Europe. So that's the one market where I think it does kind of drive consumer behavior to a degree.
We've got about 10 minutes left. I just want to say, if there's anybody who's got a question from the audience that you would like to ask, if you put your hand up, I can see you briefly. They'll all be terrified. Oh, there's always one. Will you excuse me while I just go and... Better be a good question. No pressure. Where were you? Oh, there we go. Oh, well done. Oh, my goodness, I wasn't expecting that.
Thank you.
Well done, Peter. You got the staff here, haven't you?
Exactly.
Hi, Chris Chamberlain from Point Hacks in Australia. I had a question for, mainly for Joanna, but also for Peter as well. On airport lounges, actually, so JetBlue for a long period of time just didn't have them. You're about to open 2 of them. But even though you've got products like Mint, which have a flat bed, there's been the view that if you're competing on price, it doesn't really matter, you don't have a lounge. People can just pay someone else to use their lounge instead. But what is the decision point? What is the decision point for you between being able to get away with not having a lounge and people still fly with you versus when you decide to open one because you feel that might help you grow?
Yeah, it's a great question. The business case for lounges, when you're a low-fare carrier that wants to have a great customer experience, there's a very fine line. We have a great partner that is supporting us in the building of the lounge and the operation of the lounge. But I think the reality is a lot of credit cards out there in the United States now offer lounges, so we need to do it to stay competitive for our Mint customers, particularly transatlantic, our Mosaic 4 customers, which is our top tier, and then those who hold our Premier credit card. So we've learned lessons from some of our peers to make the universe of folks who can use our lounges a rather specific and tight universe so that we don't have an overcrowding situation, but
Right.
we need to be competitive with others.
And you need, of course, to keep people like me out who'll find any excuse.
Correct.
Try and
Biometrics for that, so you can't get it.
Exactly. What about you, Peter? Lounges?
Well, on the domestic side, we're not using any lounges, even not for our business product, because people fly 2 hours. You don't want to sit 2 hours prior to that waiting in a lounge. And I guess what we are doing is a much more pragmatic approach. Now we start flying longer to Europe. You have a different proposition. So I guess we have the benefit of looking to what other airlines like JetBlue have done before, and we're introducing very selective products, and we only offer these facilities on routes where we feel it matters and where customers actually indicate that it matters.
I guess, Richard, you're rather lucky. Your customers...
Things I don't have to worry
Your
about.
passengers don't really
Lounges.
care about a lounge or not.
They just want their packages on time.
That's right. Any other questions? Your chance, you can't say you weren't given the opportunity to ask your question. Good Lord, you've stunned them all into silence. Oh, yes. Yeah, oh, good Lord, here's another one. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Steve Goldstein. I'm with Cirium. I have a question for Adrian. Abra has been in or signed a memorandum of understanding with Azul in January about a possible merger. GOL just is about to exit Chapter 11, but now Azul has filed for Chapter 11. So what is the situation about the merger negotiations?
Look, I think the obvious, you help us make a point, which is that the industry in Brazil is not healthy, and it reinforces, our core point that consolidation is good. We continue to believe in consolidation. We had made public our MOU. We had also said that the MOU was subject to regulatory approval, and really to both airlines having a similar financial structure and really sort of cleaning up their capital structure. So GOL, as you said rightly, we expect to emerge this week, knock on wood, and when that's done, we think GOL has fixed itself. We're happy that Azul is ultimately going through a restructuring, and we hope that will ultimately enable consolidation, which again we think will drive health.
How much more restructuring do you think needs to take place across the whole industry?
Well, remember that Latin America, again, is a poor region of the world, right? And going back to the infrastructure investment money discussion, when we went through COVID, governments had limited budgets. They had to decide what to do. We did not receive, as an industry in our region, much, if any, support from governments, right? So that's why you look at all of these airlines in Latin America, large airlines, reasonably successful carriers that have had to go through one restructuring after another. We don't see many more large carriers that require it in the region, right? So hopefully we're through it with this cycle. Right?
10 more minutes and then we are going to be waiting for the Prime Minister. Any more questions that anybody else wants to ask? I can see if anyone put their hand up, but no, I think...
There's one there.
Sorry? Oh, no, we have... Off again. Yes.
Hi, Rob McLeod from Hartree. Back to your earlier question about SAF, and you all agreed that there's simply not enough around. What I hear from fuel suppliers is that there's simply not enough demand.
Isn't that chicken and egg?
Well, yeah. So the question for me is, have you tried to buy any SAF and haven't been able to actually get the molecules? Or is it really just a question of it's too expensive?
You see, that's what they were saying. It's back to the Brussels.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say it's the latter part. I mean, that's the issue.
No, it's both, I would say. In India, we're not having any SAF. Should we buy SAF at other parts of the world, put it in tankers and ship it to India? Is that the solution?
Well, that would make it too expensive.
Is that an environmental healthy solution? I guess not, right? So we can tick the box that we have some SAF, we pay 4 times the price, and then we ship it all over to from the other side of the world. And then if we're going to make it locally, it's going to be at the cost of some food stock supply and all.
But then if you
is that no, yeah, is that the right solution? It's not. So I think that's why I'm hammering on the technology. If the production cost cannot be lowered, and if options like synthetic fuel cannot be further explored and further enhanced, I think that's where the discussion should take place, and probably an enhancement should take place. And even in parts of the world, and that's not where we are here, but other parts of the world where the mandates are very strict, that hasn't led to that supply. And I'm sure if you were to have some European airlines here, they would have answered the question differently than probably some of us, and would have said, yeah, we tried, but we only couldn't find it at the other side of the world, like the thing for us would be. And there are some reports for different countries in the world whereby the production of SAF would go at the detriment of food stock. I don't think that's the solution.
It has got to be affordable. We are a low-cost carrier, and customers will pick or choose JetBlue over another airline over a few dollars for a fare. And if SAF is not affordable, then customers aren't willing to pay more for it. And we're going to be the first airline to have SAF at JFK, but it's an effort to get it there, and the prices have got to come down. And the U.S. government and other governments have to subsidize it to help support and offset those costs.
Which doesn't seem terribly likely.
It's possible. We're hopeful that the SAF subsidy in the bill and before the House will pass in the Senate. But
Peter, if it's not available here, or if it's not available in sufficient quantities, how are you going to meet the targets?
What we are doing, that will not bring us to zero, but on the short term, we operate the youngest fleet in the world when it comes to number of operators with more than 100 aircraft. The average age is 4 years. And with that, we have the lowest emission per passenger. Whatever we can electrify on the ground, we electrify on the ground. There's a lot of work to be done on procedures, and not so much the case here, but in Europe, in fact, that still there's no single European skies, that would overnight gain 10%. So I think the entire discussion of, fuel reduction in terms of procedures and stuff like that, there's still a lot to be gained. So young fleet, operational procedures, electrify what you can electrify, collaborate with the manufacturers. I think those are much more realistic ways forward rather than saying we're going to build a factory, because I think there's quite a few examples in the world, and I'm interested to hear the other thing, but quite a few examples in the world where people said we're going to build a factory, and then either the factory is not being built or it doesn't produce the volumes which it's supposed to produce. So I think a more realistic, probably, approach would be needed and helpful.
Do you think we'll be still asking these same questions next year?
yes.
And the year after?
I hope not.
But we
No, I hope not.
But we will, because it's politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be good if we move on to what can be done,
Yeah.
rather than chasing something on the
imaginary,
horizon which
yeah.
is not there.
Yep.
And call it a collective responsibility for the industry to change that narrative, but I hope not, Richard.
Now, your wonderful staff, I'm going to ask, yes, oh, you've got another one over there, yes?
Yes, Mehmet Nane, Pegasus Airlines. This is for all panelists, but mainly for Richard, I think. How the drones and eVTOLs are going to affect your business?
They're not. So I'll give you an example. If you check with the Smithsonian in the United States and you want to see who delivered the first real e-commerce package ordered online by a customer to their doorstep via drone, you'll see a picture of me and my children. FedEx, we were the first ones to do it in, I think it was 2019. It was definitely pre-pandemic, so I think it was just before. It was 2019 in the fall. And we did that in a partnership with Wing. They're an Alphabet company. And a few months later, we ended that program. It was too costly on a per delivery basis or a per package basis. When you compared the economics, it was almost 3x per delivery, at least 2.5 times what a surface delivery person in our FedEx network driving on a highly optimized route can achieve from a cost per pack standpoint in terms of the delivery. It was very expensive, And I just think mathematically it's impossible for a lightweight drone delivering a 5-pound package, 15 minutes out and back, because that's the battery life, going out and back, out and back, out and back, thousands and thousands of times a day. Remember, we deliver 17 million shipments every day around the world. Not to mention the fact that if there's bad weather, you have to have redundancy because they can't fly when the weather's bad. And, you know, in the United States, you know, the first time one of those falls out of the sky and kills somebody, I think that party is over. So I'm not really bullish on the lightweight drones replacing what we do on a final mile basis. I do believe there is a place for drones, particularly larger drones with heavier payload. We're actually working with a company called Elroy Air on middle mile solutions with a drone that has a much longer range and has about a 500-pound payload. I think there is some application there. Certainly for medical supplies, getting into parts of the world that are challenged, India during monsoon season and parts of India where the roads wash out, there's application for drones. But that concept of millions of drones in the sky replacing what we do in a highly optimized route every day, mathematically, I just don't see it.
Now, final question. Which do you think is easier to transport? People or parcels?
Parcels.
Yeah. Which do you think? Which would you rather be transported?
They don't yell at you and act crazy on the airplane.
Let me rephrase it. What is more fun to do? People are parcels, right? Then we win, no?
That's right. Fair.
Okay, here we go.
You win hands down,
Yeah.
do you?
But we've had some pretty interesting things move through our network. You know, live animals and all kinds of crazy things. I could tell you stories for days about some of the things we've seen shipped.
I can also tell you a story for days.
I'm sure you can.
We had a baby born.
I probably won't compare.
Oh, so you've had a baby
We
born?
had a baby, San Juan, Fort Lauderdale. We gave the baby lifetime flight benefits.
You didn't?
We did, of course.
God, I wish I'd been born. You gave the baby lifetime benefits?
Correct.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's your most unusual?
And we actually had a baby from Costa Rica, same thing. We did not
Pretty
give
awesome.
them flight benefits.
you
We're
could-
going
you could-
to have to go
Yeah.
back and
You
do
did
it.
not!
We did not.
You could do that now. You could, now you could now.
We're going to find them and go back and
That's
do it.
JetBlue
how-
bringing
yeah,
humanity
that's
back to air travel.
Yes, and yes.
Go on.
I think for us, the many first-time flyers we have, that's really changing the fabric of the nation. People used
Did you give them lifetime benefits?
No, because there's just too many of them, millions and millions. But they used to travel 2 days by train, one part of the country to the other part, and now it's 2 hours by plane. I think that is really changing the connectivity of the
And
nation.
you haven't even scratched the surface to a large extent.
I mean, it's just the start of it. The number of flyers in India is still a single-digit number as part of that. So that really, the opportunity out there is just massive.
What's the most in you? Go on.
We do have from time to time some very special passengers. We have a special deal where we'll fly pandas between the United States and China. We paint the airplanes with the Panda Express livery and we make a big deal out of it, and then the Panda exchange between the U.S. and China when we're moving them from
With or without
zoos.
tariffs.
Well, no tariffs on the pandas, at least not yet. Those are
And you
always...
give the pandas lifetime benefits?
The pandas have lifetime benefits. We fly them pro bono, and we really enjoy doing that.
That's nice.
Well, let's hope SAF is not on our agenda next year. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
our panel, thank you very much.
Thank you.